I'm going to tell you a story, though, largely about one project, and that came to an end just in July, after 10 glorious years. And through that, I think there are lots of references to time and timeliness on behalf of the children who are involved, the practitioners who are involved, the families of the children and others, that I hope you'll just pick up the threads as we go along. The project is called, the stream of work really that we do is called Roots and Wings, a title that we kind of acquired. I don't know where it's from. I've never found any particular reference, but the notion is that every child should have roots and then wings. Too far? Too far. And I've just put here, children leading the way, with a question mark on it. And something that you're probably not unfamiliar with, the notion of curiosity as being fundamental to children, and I would say anybody, being able to develop. I'm not making any claim for development here other than the meaning of the word, as in moving on through life. The notion that if you're curious, you will want to explore, that you will discover something, that will give you pleasure, that you want to do it again. And hey, look at me, I can do this now, so I've got a new skill. It's going to give me a bit of confidence, might mean my self-esteem might go up a little bit. It'll make me feel a bit more safe, and hey, I want to do it again. I like the notion of it being cyclical rather than linear, the notion that it gets embedded, the notion that in the practice that I'm involved with, it's a bit like growing green manure. You grow it and you plough it back in on every level. And these good old 6 core strengths, when the project started, to give you a bit of context, this was a primary school in an area in West Yorkshire in England that is renowned for all the D words of being deprived, disadvantaged, etc. and pilloried for that really on one estate. And we were brought in by a new senior management team for a school that was in crisis, really. It was in what's known here as special measures, which means it's been deemed as being completely ineffective, and was full of children who had had a really rotten time in our education system. The oldest children in the school, it's a primary school, some of them had had 14 teachers in recent times. They really didn't like teachers very much. They didn't trust adults very much. Their first question would be, when are you going? Or are you intending to stay, kind of things. There was a lack of trust. And so us being able to, if you like, underpin our program with something that wasn't exactly fulsome theory, but had something that would help our work as artists, and I must stress we're not art therapists. We came to these fundamentals, I suppose, of attachment, self-regulation, etc. And I would say we've moved on and through those, but at the beginning they were crucial, actually, to give us a kind of chronological base for the work. And one of the things that happened kind of as a byproduct of the work was that we kept our space, which was a room in the school. It was just open at lunchtime. And what we discovered was that children accessed it all the time. And they would come in and they would decide what they were going to do with the materials on offer and do it with very little adult help, other than that they requested. And one of the things that we wanted to underpin this work was that children were somehow given some control over their own development, and indeed over some cultural change, whether that was within their school environment or indeed out with it. And one of the ways that we do that, and what my practice is involved, is helping to create new traditions. Those times in life that are out of the everyday, those times when we're given permission to be different. and at those times it might be annual, that can be looked forward to, and they can be constructed by the people who are involved in them. And one such is Lantern Land, which is that annually in March, the children in years 3 and 4 make their own celebration, and this celebration is about community, and we talked a lot to children about what community means to them. It's a subject that isn't often covered. There's an expectation that children will follow certain ways of being, but actually to enter into conversations with them about what community means was quite unusual. So here we see some children there on the steps with drums, and they're entertaining people as they come to a transformed playground. They've written their own songs, and they've made these wondrous constructions that are representative of where they live. And they're made out of willow and paper, and they're candlelit. If you live down here, you'll have seen them from Same Sky in Brighton. It's a lantern making here started about 20 odd years ago and has since become a bit viral. You can see them here, and they're representative of home. Each one has some hidden in it, you can't see it anywhere here, a star or a heart representative of feelings about home, and centrally is a big lantern that is called the lantern of the community that everyone has had a hand in making. So literally many hands have made light work. And on this night, this place looks different. One year, a rather drunk, I have to say, Dad turned up, having dragged some of his younger children out of bed. I said, I've just brought them over to see this because it just looks lovely. Because he'd seen it from his window. And this is unusual in an area which is usually regarded as being less than that. The most pressing group of children, the children with the most pressing issues were those who were about to leave this school. They'd had the most rotten deal. And therefore we were charged with doing something about transition. We knew these children were going to go up to a high school where they would be regarded as the bottom of the pile. And we needed to give them something in themselves that would get them to the next place. And so we started self-portraits with the kids. This is the toughest lad in the class who decided in the end to do his cross-stitch. And he's now this great hulking young man. And I saw him not too long ago in the street, and he said, I said, Sandra, you're still doing cross-stitch? He said, no, but I did textiles. Which I really liked that. And here, Tammy actually came back to school. She's now a play leader in school, and this is her with the self-portrait she made when she was 11. And you can see every artist would make their own statement about what they'd done. And here she's written describing, I had this velvet coat, and she said, that's what I need. And she took literally the coat off my back and had herself photographed in it and did her version of herself as Vermeer's girl with a pearl earring. And this is her bringing it back into school because she's now working there, rather slightly blushingly bringing it back in, and is hanging it on the wall again and is talking about it and reflecting on what that time meant to her. And at the end of that year, we instigated a transition carnival. This was the thing we set up to get our children to the high school. They would literally fly up together. This is a quote just from Bryony, one of the participants of I think the second year, who said this project makes the community into one big family. It's a tradition. When you are part of it, it makes you feel special. So that notion of having a part to play in something, that is very, very visible. So the children created T-shirts with their wings on the back, literally their own wings. They created structures representative of the qualities and values they wanted to have when they got to high school. They made a garland of birds, importantly, each one representing a child in that year group, each one bearing their wish for themselves in what is to come. And they then undergo something of a rite of passage in that, thankfully, I think, the local high school has a long drive that you've got to walk up, which when you're 11 is terrifying. And but kind of, as one child once put it, it's scary in the right way. You know, it's not, it kind of dispels the fact that you are definitely, obviously every child everywhere thinks they're going to have their head put down a toilet when they get to high school. That's a common assumption. But here, this is a scary idea of literally passing from one place to another. But before this, they have marched through their estate, and they've made a lot of noise with the music they've created. And what we found as well as the years went on, obviously there was lots of expectation of children that this is what they were going to do, and so they were very assertive when they got to this place. It was actually, look at us, we're here, we have something to contribute. They then go into the high school, and there's this wonderful kind of evolved passing over of the children from one school to the other. It ends with the words where the head teacher of the primary school takes that garland of birds and hands them to the high school teacher and says, please take care of our children. So the notion that they're everyone's children, in that sense, they're not, and she doesn't say make sure they get their exam results. She says please take care of our children. And these are some children on the way back to school after all that's happened, and these are girls, and they're singing to themselves as they come back and bouncing along the road. When we get back, by the way, all those self-portraits are on show in school, and there's an open day in school, and they get to show their work to younger children in school, and it's a great atmosphere in the school that day. Other things started to happen as a result of this work. So transition of children from the nursery or reception into the big school happened. These are children who've made their own little wings here, who literally just moved from one building to the other, but again marking the passage of time. They make things that have got their memories on them. They make hats that have got their memories of what they've done, of how they perceive themselves at that point. They take their own photographs of what they're doing, etc. And here you see back to school. This is after a parade, and here you can see children explaining things to adults. The experts in the room here are the children who've created the work. And interestingly, they know a lot about each other's work. So adults are really involved as audience, really, on that day, I would say. Here you can see, again, children explain to other children, and here you can see a very small child accessing some of the information. Over 10 years, we produced an awful lot of documentation. We kept what we call day-to-day books, where everything is written. So there's this wonderful ongoing document, which has kind of become the family albums of the project, because they're accessed by everybody. And this was never more apparent to us than when we had to leave. For one reason or another, we had to stop the project. We had to leave after 10 years. And you can imagine, you know, the levels of sorrow that created amongst the team, amongst the children. It was a very protracted and managed process in the end, done with as much respect as we could muster for the children. They were not told in an assembly this was going to happen, which was the suggestion, which was one suggestion. We informed year 6 first as a group, and they took it on, and their responses told us an awful lot that a questionnaire wouldn't have, about how much they had taken on of the project over those years. These were children for whom that old school hadn't existed. We had always been there, so they just expected us to be there. And so they were incredibly sad, but here was an enormous lesson around transition, change, the passing of time, so it was done in that context. And in the end, we had children saying to us, don't worry, we'll help you leave like you help us leave. So it was just kind of inculcated in them. So we had one day where we had every child in school came through the art room. We did an awful lot of talking and an awful lot of looking at those family albums. And here we have some girls who were involved some years ago who came back to remember, to look at things, to remember who they were then, to look at where they were now, to tell us what they'd thought was going on then and how it affected them now. And we got lots of memories from children, of even young children, of what was important to them. I drew some T-Rexes and coloured them red. I'm a really good drawer. Lantern Land, in a memory, I've enjoyed the most because it's when family, friends and the community can get together and have fun. But we had lots of children relating a whole experience of being in that space. Not just saying, I can do this, but saying, I remember when we did this. So the notion of us all being on a level. So what goes around comes around, as mentioned, the top left, that's the emblem for the Centre for Medical Humanities, where I've worked, in Durham University, where I've worked as an associate there for 10 years. What's happening now is that here we've got the start. There was a PhD student there who's just finished, who's now Dr. Annie Raw, who's written a very, very interesting piece which is the beginning of the theorisation of this kind of work, which is work that happens kind of in the liminal spaces between the arts, health and education. Here we have, these are two young practitioners from Australia. What we've done along the way is nurture practitioners, so I'm delighted to say that 3 of the team who carry on working with me are under 25. One of them was a local girl who came as a very shy sibling of a younger child and who now has her fine art degree and is a really great practitioner in her own right. And then here we have Rachel coming along and saying, can we do you, please, so to speak, as a case study in a master's at the Open University. So again, more and more of that green manure is happening. And lastly, and this is a redefining of sustainability, because this story has an essentially happy ending. On the left here, examining his hand, he's actually doing a bit of contour drawing, is a man called Dean Tumbling, who was a teacher at school, and when we first came into school he was very, very critical of what it was we were doing, because he was trying to get these kids somewhere, and why were they being given to that arty-farty woman over there for an afternoon a week? But as the years went on, he changed his view, and we actually became really good colleagues. And this is the head teacher who commissioned the work back in the day, 10 years ago, who has since semi-retired. And this year, Dean rang me up and said, because he'd left the school some years ago, about 5 years ago, and said, I've got my first headship, I want you in my school. And so we're now being funded by his school, his primary school, which is in inner city Bradford, a very interesting area, biggest council estate in Europe, allegedly, although I'm sure there's lots that go for that one. He is committing his pupil premium, which is the additional funding given for children in schools who really, need extra help for attainment. He's committing to us working in this school, and Leslie is volunteering on it. So that's it. Back to the beginning. Thank you very much.